Hi everyone, thanks a lot for joining us for this Installer Scotland webinar with SNIPEF. We're here with Martyn Raine from SNIPEF. Martyn, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
And we've got Barry Sharp from Renewable Heat. How are you, Barry?
Very good, Joe. Good to see you again.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for joining us. So a bit of housekeeping before we start. We've got a chat box here to the right, which we've already put a message in. There's also the ask a question button underneath, which there's a little one next to that because I think Kim's already asked a question, which is brilliant. If you do have any questions as we go for Barry or Martyn, please pop them in the ask a question button or the comment section, and we'll get them answered for you at the end. So let's introduce you to our speakers. Barry, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Yeah, so my business is Renewable Heat. We're based in Falkirk, but we cover most of central Scotland. We are about 13 staff, I think, and I've been in heat pumps for about 15 years now, so I've pretty much made all the mistakes in order.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. And Martyn, what's your role at SNIPEF, please?
Yeah, Martyn Raine, Technical and Skills Manager with SNIPEF. So I provide technical support and advice to our members, deliver training within SNIPEF.
Perfect. And Martyn, what we're going to be looking at today?
Yeah, today it's all about sort of myth busting for the heat pump sort of sector. And, it's key that, we start, I suppose, supporting other people to make that transition into renewable heat, into, delivering sort of low carbon technology, and at the moment, our members, we're not seeing a massive transition across into this part of the sector. So today's all about myth busting, trying to support those, those businesses that are wanting to make that move and maybe have some questions. So we'll have a go at sort of dispelling some of those myths or maybe confirming some of those myths through the questions that I've got for Barry today.
Yeah, perfect. So Martyn's going to be posing the questions to Barry. If you've got any questions for either of them, please drop them in the comment box and the ask a question button. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so yeah, my name's Martyn Raine. I'm the Technical and Skills Manager with SNIPEF. I just want to give a brief sort of introduction to what we do as a business. We're a plumbing trade association for Scotland and Northern Ireland. We've got approximately 750 member firms across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and they employ somewhere between sort of 3,000 and 4,000 plumbing operatives within those businesses. Our membership is a diverse membership, providing a whole host of different services in different parts of the plumbing industry. We provide those, services such as technical support, training. We've got a building standards self-certification scheme, a water safe approved contractor scheme, employment advice, and so on. So yeah, this is the package that we're offering. We're also a managing agent for plumbing apprentices in Scotland, and we have approximately 900 apprentices in the system at any one time, and that does go up and down depending on demand. We also represent the plumbing industry at sort of various groups and bodies, such as Scottish Government groups, the Department for Economy, we meet with them in Northern Ireland on a regular basis. We're also 1/3 of BSE Skills Limited, who were created when Summit Skills sort of disbanded. And that's made up of ourselves, SNIPEF, Select, who are the trade association for electricals in Scotland, and BESA. And we were brought together pretty much to look after national occupational standards, qualifications, apprenticeship frameworks in the BSE sector. So I suppose that's enough about what we do. It'd be great to have you as a member, so feel free to drop us a line if it's something that interests you. Today, like I've mentioned earlier, we want to cover some of those, common challenges or barriers that are faced by the supply chain. And as I mentioned, we're not seeing a massive transition of plumbing businesses moving across into the renewable sector. So today's all about trying to dispel some of those myths and trying to support those, those plumbing businesses that are maybe thinking about moving across. We're all fully aware of the government ambition. In Scotland alone, the Scottish Government want to see heat pump delivery increase, year on year to the end of 2025. So, they'll be looking at something like 64,000 heat pumps being installed by the end of 2025.
Martyn, I don't think people actually realise how aggressive the targets are, because they're talking about doubling the heat pump market every year for the next 5 years, and they're expecting by 2030 for 50% of all boiler changes to new heat pumps. So the market's going to move very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I suppose from a business perspective, we've got the people in that supply chain at the moment doing that. We're expecting those businesses then to double their output, which to me is a massive ask for any business. I mean, what's your opinion from your business, Barry, on that? What does it mean to your business?
I think it's very difficult to do, because if we just take alone the gas boiler market, your typical gas boiler change is one man, one day. And we're going to go to full heating system changes and hot water cylinder changes. So you could be talking 15 men days to change a system. So we could be talking 10 times as many staff to do the job. It's a big ask.
Yeah, well, it's a big. I mean, I suppose financially for a business to be taking on double the risk, you're going to need double the equipment, double the resource sort of thing. That to me, is that achievable in your eyes from that side of things, affording that?
Not easily. Not
No.
easily. And the problems, I don't think equipment's a problem. I think staff will be the issue.
Yeah.
And not just employing staff, but also training guys over.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, we see the plumbing industry being perfectly poised for any mass deployment of heat pumps across Scotland. They've got those fundamental skill sets of, working on heating systems, plumbing systems. To me, these are probably the perfect people to be, dealing with, to get them upskilled, for a quicker solution to this situation. But again, I think we need to probably, think about our capacity at the moment. The workforce probably is getting smaller anyway. So I think that's probably our first stage. I think following up through apprenticeships is probably the follow-up to that as well. So it's definitely going to be one of those challenges moving ahead for us. So like I say, we believe, plumbers, existing plumbers that are recognised, that industry recognised plumbers that have time served, will deliver what's needed if they're upskilled correctly. So I liaise with a lot of our members on a regular basis in different forums and training sessions, and I get a lot of different questions coming from them. I get questions from the public as well. And what I'll do now, Barry, is try and pose some of the questions to you to see what your journey's been like, to see that, see how you tackle some of these problems and what your opinions are on it. So one of the main ones that I get asked is, I'll get told, I should say, is it's difficult to get involved with renewables. And like I say, I want to try and find out a little bit more about how you got involved and, how did your journey start to get involved with renewables?
So about 15, it might be longer now. 15 years ago, we actually got a client that asked us for a heat pump because he'd done them commercially.
Okay.
So we were completely blind. And the reason was he actually sponsored us to go and do the heat pump installation, do the training with him and install it. That's how we got into it. After we'd done one, we just kind of followed on from there. We do 1 year an expert, apparently.
And how did it, it must have been quite daunting, that transition across to do that, was it? Because it's new processes and new equipment that you're using as well.
A lot harder back then because there's not as much information about it as there is now.
Yeah.
There's a lot more people doing it. There's a lot more access to information, a lot more training you can do. Back then, it was like 1 or 2 days up in Liverpool, of all places.
Okay. Yeah.
Just for a basic understanding, and then they give us that manufacturer give us support installing it.
So I suppose now the technology is more established. I know the technology's been around for years, but it's more established in the side, sort of the training network and the knowledge side of things for support for a business coming across into this. So it's maybe a little bit easier now, I suppose, than it was when you started out.
Yeah, a lot more support now than it used to be. Yes, and the technology's moved on quite a bit as well. So it's a lot easier to fit an air source now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. And is that similar with all heat pumps with ground source as well? Is it?
Yeah, they're getting easier. They're getting easier because they've got more cushion. They've got more flexibility in the heat pump.
Right, So that initial startup then, when you're moving across, because, was there any sort of real upfront investment into your business to do that? Or was it quite a smooth, transition across to start delivering that? So
we were probably pre-MCS then. So the transition to MCS is time consuming. It was time consuming then. Yeah. It's not difficult. It's just time, really, because you have to get your head around it all. Mm-hmm. But once you understand the process, then it's just rinse, repeat. So it's not difficult once you understand it. It's just getting your head around it all. But it's just, there's a lot of documentation you have to follow. But if you're used to being out the tools all day, or you're used to doing day-to-day stuff, and you have to go and retrain on a whole new process, that's the difficult bit, and setting processes up in your own business.
Yeah, I suppose as well, you mentioned MCS there and the processes that probably come with MCS. And that's another one that I get, how do I become MCS accredited? Or again, it's difficult. And I think we've got businesses that are working in the gas industry, oil industry, where they're used to these processes for a lot of years. It's, I suppose it's learning something new. So that's often, I often hear that it's really difficult. So, that
it's not difficult enough that you can't do it. Because if you can go away and do your gas safe qualification, then you're used to understanding processes and understanding processes and stuff like that, but it's just more of it, really.
Okay, so that initial MCS registration, how did you find it? Was it a challenge to you? Was it daunting? Was it just a walk in the park?
Yeah, it's challenging. I'm not going to lie, it's challenging because you need to find a project first.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of convince. It's like it's a chicken and egg thing here, where you're trying to find a project that's like you're going to sell a heat pump before you're qualified, before you're certified. So there is a bit of that, and there's a bit of kind of having to suss out how to do it all. But I mean, I've not done this for a long time, but what I'm seeing for some of the manufacturers, they're giving you a lot more support now. They'll help you design it, help you size it, and that's the hard bit, really. And then the rest of it's just making sure you've got the paperwork right.
And I suppose, again, it's that network of information and knowledge now that we can tap into, I suppose, and there is more support there. So you're walking, you know, not blind into it, but, you know, I suppose you probably would make mistakes and learn from that moving on and, you know, what's required. So maintaining
there used to be a joke that you would fit 10 heat pumps and the first 5 would be wrong. But it's just that's a lot better now. It's a lot better now.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd also see that you get a lot of complaints about MCS, but I only hear complaints about MCS from people that are not in MCS. But when you're in the system, you understand it. There's a reason for it all. To make us more accountable and make sure we're doing the job right, because you would expect these processes in any business, any accountable business. That's all it is.
Okay. So on a regular basis, so I'm imagining you've got to maintain this accreditation or certification. What's your sort of regular stuff that you have to do for that? You know, in the sense of, is it yearly, 2 yearly, 3 yearly? What's the sort of cycle on that?
Hourly. You're always doing stuff that's MCS stuff. So you're doing designs, you're doing contracts, you're doing packs from the selling the data. All that stuff's all MCS, part of the MCS process. Right. So from the first point of speaking to the client, how you advertise has got to be MCS or REC standards. But how you're collecting information, how you're storing it, how you're processing the designs, how you're talking to the customer, how you're signing the customer up, how you're processing the customer, and how you're registering it. It's all part of the MCS, but it's just part of your day-to-day job now. Once you understand it, it's just repeat.
Just getting it into that cycle, I suppose, and doing it time and time again. Yeah. So you mentioned REC there, actually. Is that another sort of body that you've got to be part of?
Consumer code. It's not the only consumer code, but so REC's there to protect the client, really. So there's certain terms and conditions that we adhere to. Payment terms and stuff like that REC set, and there's also it's there for if a client's got any grievances, they've got someone to go to.
Okay, got you. And is that you know, again, is that something you're maintaining on a regular basis along with your MCS sort of?
So they've got model contracts, so you can use a lot of their stuff as well. So they've got model contracts and how you should be talking to clients. As long as you're adhering to their rules, and all it is just trying to stop cold calling and mis-selling of heat pumps. That's all it's there for. So again, just making yourself accountable.
I suppose as well, moving forward, if we've got a mass deployment of heat pumps across the UK, there's going to be times where people could be missold, you know, products and services or something like that. You know, it's going to protect the business and the consumer, I suppose, because you've got that. I suppose you recognise through that as well, you know, and it gives you credibility as a business as well. So
yeah, well, I mean, you don't have a business if you're not credible, if you're not accountable. So just doing a good job, you'll get you repeat work, and all I do is making sure you're doing it by REC standards and MCS standards.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay then.
But I mean, to go back to that, you've also got, although we're saying hourly for MCS stuff, there's also an annual audit. They'll come out and check in. It's about a day's worth. Yeah. Where they'll come and they'll take a couple of jobs, and they'll go right through it from start to finish to make sure you're doing it all. And in actual fact, although an audit sounds a bit daunting, it's actually pretty good, because the guy will be in time and say, this is where you're wrong, this is where you need to do better. And he might come back and say, look, improve that. Yeah. So it's a part of your learning process as well.
Yeah. And I always remember back to my gas safe inspections, you know, if you're worried about it, but you could learn from it sort of thing, and you take that. You know, it's always good to know if you are doing something that's not quite right, so you can rectify that and move on sort of thing. So I always thought, like, don't stick your heels in, you know, learn from this experience. And so it sounds like a similar sort of experience, really. So we'll move on from the certification, because we could probably spend quite a lot of time talking about that. But I want to try and dig into the technical stuff a little bit more. You know, some of the questions.
Oh, I need to get somebody else in, Martin.
Well, you know, I mean, my background, I've not been on the tools for a number of years now. So we were fitting gas boilers. So, you know, heat pumps, it's new to me in the sense of the technology and, you know, the technical aspect of it sort of thing. So, you know, and some of the thoughts and some of the questions I get and statements that people say is, one of them here is heat pumps will not work in older buildings. Or heat pumps are only designed for new buildings. Is that the case?
Nah. We've got successful projects in houses that are hundreds of years old. Okay. I mean, if I'm going to an old house, I'm wanting to make sure that they're tackling the low-hanging fruit first. If it's drafty, single glazing, I'll be steering them away from a heat pump, because if I try and heat it with a heat pump, it'll just be too big and it'll be too costly. But I mean, we do a lot of houses in the centre of Edinburgh that are stone built, solid insulation, solid walls, but they've got double glazing and the loft's been done. So the heat loss isn't that bad, and it actually works really well because the heating's on at a continuous rate. So it's just constantly just loading the fabric up, and you got a nice thermal mass in it. So no, you have to heat a house no matter what. So you might as well do it with an efficient source rather than inefficient.
Yeah. Another one that somebody said to me the other day, that if I'm taking out an oil boiler, there's no way the heat pump can replace that oil boiler. To me, that's probably a common thing that's happening out there, I would say, is it?
The difficult bit is what's involved in the upgrade. The heat pump's the easy bit because it's a box. It's an air source. It's a box outside a new hot water tank. That's the easy bit. The hard bit is the rest of the heating system. Is it compatible? The heat pump, are the radiators big enough? Are the pipes big enough?
Yeah. And I'll pick up on that in a couple of questions, actually. So you're talking about the system there. And again, it's something else that somebody said to me, it'll only work with an underfloor heating system. But I would imagine if you're going into some of these older properties, you'll not be taking up floors, or you'll not be doing the overlay systems when you've already got sort of radiators in place and stuff like that. We
can do underfloor heating retrospectively, but it's just costly because you're eating into the fabric of the building. So you're talking about lifting floors, or you're talking about changing floors and skirtings and stuff like that. But we do it.
I suppose you cost as well.
Radiators work just as well. I mean, the modern heat pumps, a low MCS, say a max flow temperature of 55, we're designing at 50, 50, 45, 50. So all you're doing is just oversizing radiators. In actual fact, most of the oil systems I see, because oil engineers are pretty good, they're oversizing radiators anyway. So when I go there on an oil system, I'm more likely to see 15mm pipe at the radiators, and I'm more likely to see oversized radiators. Okay. So a lot of times it's just, right, let's juggle these radiators about, put a new one here, and we're good to go. Yeah,
okay. So, and again, I suppose that's a key time when you're visiting that job, that initial visit, is that survey, and how, I suppose that's really key to a successful delivery of the project. So what are the key things you look at? You've mentioned drafting, things like that, draft proof, how good is the build? What are you looking out for when you get, are you raking about the whole building and up in lofts and, into all the cupboards and what?
If you ask my guys, I always miss something. I miss in a survey. But you're having to think about a lot of things, and it's not just hydraulics, it's also power as well. We've got to make sure they've got enough power in the house, and situation of the heat pump, where we're putting the hot water cylinder as a space for it. How am I getting services from A to B? Not just the fabric of the building. There's lots to consider.
I suppose as well, we've gone through a sort of generation of combi boilers where your typical stored hot water systems have been removed, and they've knocked down the cupboard or whatever and built into it, sort of thing. So these are the things you're considering. So you'll be upgrading, I would imagine, from a typical cylinder across onto something that's more suitable to your heat pump, are you?
Yes. Hot water cylinders for heat pumps have got larger coils in them. So you're generally, I think it's about 1 meter squared for a standard oil or gas boiler, and it's 3 meters squared for a heat pump. So it's 3 times the area. So you can't just switch them over. It has to be a heat pump compatible cylinder. So it's another cost involved and another bit of faffing about. Yeah. And technical term.
Your system setup, I would imagine, is it the same setup that you'd have for a conventional heating system, like a Y plan, S plan, that sort of scenario?
Almost. Well, if you do S plan or Y plan, you get heating and hot water on at the same time, but most heat pumps are going to be, you can't do both at the same time because the flow temperature going to the hot water cylinder is higher than the heating, because the heating is generally weather compensated, so it's variable. So you're either going a Y plan, which is a diverter valve, rather than a mid position. Okay. Or I've seen a couple do S plans, but generally it's a Y diverter.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose on that design stage, again, you've done your survey, you've made sure that you haven't missed anything on the job, and your lads are complaining about it on the job and stuff.
I'm not complaining anyway; it doesn't really matter.
But yeah, I suppose, one that I heard the other day was you can't have thermostatic radiator valves on the system as well. Is that something you can leave in place pretty much?
Yeah. There's some conversations about. I see some guys down south on Twitter talking about keeping it all open volume. And years ago, when we worked with Danfoss, that's how they used to do it as well. But your main critical thing is open volume. Yeah. If you shut the whole system down, you're going to have issues with thermostats. So as long as you've got buffers for open volume, or you're creating open volume in the system, then there's no reason why you can't control the heat individually in the rooms. Got you. To be fair, that's kind of what you want. You want the comfort thing to be able to have the rooms at a different temperature from the living room. So that's the best way to do it.
And the heat pump can sort of, understand that the flow rates are dropping and can sort of adjust to that output. Then.
This is the beauty about the new generation of heat pumps that are all inverter driven. They've got a lot more flexibility. Okay, the old ones used to be on or off, and that would be it. So you had to have loads of open volume, and these ones can dial all the way down. So they're a lot more like a gas boiler than they used to be.
Yeah. I suppose that's more understandable to the end user as well. You know, having that flexibility, because it's a bit of a change for that homeowner, I would imagine. You know, and understanding how it's working.
It takes a couple of visits to get a client kind of settled in with a heat pump, because they have to get used to they've not got that quick ramp up they used to have. So, I mean, you know, I've got a gas boiler in my house, and the heat will come on 15, 20 minutes beforehand, and the house will start to be heating up, but we don't have that luxury. So you can't really be turning the heating off for a long period, so it just takes too long to recover. But on the flip side of that, once you settle them in and they understand how they're using it and not to touch it too much, the best feedback I get is that they're using the same sort of energy, as in cost, but in actual fact, the house is just continually warm and comfortable all the time.
I'm just wondering if there's a bit of work there to be carried out, you know, maybe at a higher level, in the sense of, you know, educating the public, the people that are going to be getting these, you know, pre-installation, so they know what's coming along, they know what work's going to happen, and, you know, we're going to have to change your cylinder, or put a cylinder in, or, you know, and, you know, could the government, or, you know, some of the bodies that are out there start educating them in these transitions as well, just getting that mindset change a bit.
I don't think the public generally, the clients that come to us, because most people find us now to do an install. And most of them are well educated on what the limitations of the heat pump are and what's expected before I speak to them. Compared to what 10 years ago, when you were convincing people about the technology, you're having to convince them that it's going to work, although it's not giving the same heat. Now they're well aware. So the public's catching up pretty quickly.
So it's an easier sell, I suppose, because they're coming to you rather than you.
They're coming to you,
They're coming to you now. That works out quite well. So there's different types of heat pumps on the market. You know, we know there's air source, ground source, water source, I suppose. You know, there's different types in the sense of, you know, monoblock and split systems. And you know, what is the difference there, and what is your preferred choice, or is it dictated by site conditions?
No, it's generally manufacturers, to be fair. So certain manufacturers prefer a split system and some prefer a monoblock. So the difference basically is that the refrigeration gas is split between indoor and outdoor. That's the difference. So the benefits of split will be there's no water outside. So there's less risk of frost of it. So you see quite a lot of split systems in social housing. There's less risk. But they're very similar performance, pros and cons wise. I prefer the monoblock stuff because it takes one less trade out. Because in that case, the ground source and air source that we fit will be a hermetically sealed unit, so we don't have to touch the gas at all.
So when you say the gas, the F-gas side of things.
The F-gas, sorry, the refrigeration gas, yes.
Got you. So you don't require to be F-gas registered then to be doing that then?
No.
It's a sealed unit. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so you mentioned the electrical supply earlier on, and I think what you're probably getting at is the supply coming to that building. Is there enough to power those heat pumps that are situated there? How do you ensure that there is? What's your process for that? Is there a way of...
You lick your finger and run across the meter. Most domestic houses are 80 or 100 amp, which is fine. And most domestic houses, they're on a pre-approved list. So all you've got to do is make sure that you're not overloading the system and then notify them you're doing it. You don't want to be... Last thing you want to do is, for example, we've just won a job in Kinross where the heat loss was slightly over the max we could get away with a single heat pump. So we had to put two in. So then we're starting to push 35, 40 amp supply, which is a bit too much. You need to check. And you go back and check what they're using in the house. And it turns out they had full electric heating. They had a hot tub and they had an electric car charger outside. So at that point, you're over the allowed limits. You have to go and ask them, is it okay if I put this in? And we got them to take the hot tub out.
What sort of turnaround is there on that permission to do so? Or, that?
It's quick. It's 7 days. It's really quick.
Is it? So it's quite quick. So if you've got a price in there,
you fill a form in, you check the numbers, you send it off, and they come back to you in a week.
Right, got you. Now you mentioned something quite interesting there, the electric vehicle situation, because if we've got a higher demand on the heat pump drawing down electricity, and people are putting the EVs in, who comes first in that race, or whoever gets there first scenario.
And it's not just the domestic supply, it's also upstream as well, your transformer. Because if you're fitting heat pumps just now, they tend to be rural. So you need to be careful as well with the supply on that street. So this client the first protocol was go and speak to the heat pump, go and speak to the electrical supplier and see if they'll give you a split phase or 3-phase and see what it costs to upgrade. So they came back and said, need to change transformers, 10 grand. So that puts the job to a stop. And that's when we started going back and looking at the supply and kind of narrowing it down a bit. But we're we're not really talking about as much as we should do about the fact that we're all meant to be driving electric cars and electric heating in the next decade, and there's maybe a few houses that can't handle it.
I'm just wondering,
especially larger ones.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering as well, in the sense of, you know, a plumbing company moving across, because, you know, when we're doing gas, the gas meter's there. We're not checking that there's enough gas coming to that gas meter. I know we do our tests and whatnot.
Yeah.
We've got enough going in and whatnot.
Yeah,
but,
you assume it's okay. Yeah.
I've never read anywhere where they say, oh, this is how you do this load test, or this is how you find that out. So is that something you just naturally learn by doing this?
It's part of MCS. I got pulled up on my audit about it because the guy who does the audits is an electrician by trade, so he pulled me up on it. Right. We weren't doing it properly, so that's why we started doing it more often.
I'm just wondering if there's, you know, if this process should be identified somewhere to help people, you know.
As an MCS, it's part of MCS.
So it's all there. Is that open to everyone on MCS, or is that just to an MCS accredited person?
No. If you go onto the MCS website, you can access all the standards for installers, and you can read through them and get your head around it.
Oh, good. Okay. So you mentioned a little bit as well about the split systems or the monoblock systems being potentially at risk of, you know, catching the frost or being damaged mechanically, I suppose. Mm-hmm. What other sort of service requirements, you know, are required for heat pumps? Because what I'm thinking about here is when we were fitting gas boilers, it was a case of trying to secure that annual service to get more income on a year-on basis. Can you still establish that as a business for future income?
Yeah, we still do servicing. Yeah, so although you've not got the same requirements, it's not as if we're going into a plate heat exchange or going into a burner unit and checking it or checking gas rates. It's still good practice to go and check the heat pump, because the things that give heat pumps bother tends to be water condition, filters, settings. These are things the client might not know. So quite often we'll go down to a heat pump and might see it cycling quite too much. Mm-hmm. There's a classic example. I look at the data and the heat pump cycling. It's doing hot water every hour, 2 hours. So something going wrong there. So that's something that's causing wear and tear on the heating, additional cost to the client that needs to be checked. And there's also unvented cylinders need to be checked, general condition of electric, stuff like that. So there's still work to be done in the service. And the client doesn't know the ins and outs of a heat pump, so they need somebody who knows what they're talking about to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the data as well. Is that something you can get from the appliance? You can pull that data off?
It's very powerful. I mean, everyone's catching up with this now. You'll eventually see it on gas boilers as well, to be fair. But the majority of our heat pumps, we connect to them online. So if it goes to a fault, it notifies us straight away. So one of us can look at it, go on straight away, either reset the fault, stick it on backup heat if there's one fitted, or we could say, right, that looks like Mrs. Jones has been mucking about with the settings again, and then get on the phone and tell it, leave it alone, and then change it. And it gives us a heads up.
And that's you doing that remotely as well. It's not at the
from my phone.
On your phone.
I've fixed heat pumps in the pub with a pint in my hand. And charged for it.
Very flexible then if you're doing it. I suppose it's how you can respond to that problem as well, you know, in the sense of you not having to do that site visit, you know, 4 or 5 hours away, you know, to travel to rectify something.
Yeah, Martin, this is for our benefit really, not the clients, because it gives us a heads up, because some of these faults might not be real. It might just be they've shut all the radiators down, or something's happened, they've turned the power off and it's went to a glitch, so you just reset it and watch it and see what it does. Saves you driving out and wasting half a day for something which might be nothing. And you can start analysing the data as well. Look at the graphs, look at the flow temperatures, look at what the heat pump's doing during those hours. You can learn a lot from it.
Okay, so that's really interesting, actually, that you do remote inspection. Well, not inspections, but you can monitor what's going on. And I think that, to me, from a consumer perspective, would offer a trust in that technology, in the sense of, well, somebody can get to this. I'm on a remote island somewhere. I don't need somebody all the time to physically turn up and do something, if you see what I know. You might have to at certain stages. Do you ever get any problems? You know, we talked a little bit about monoblock there. Do you ever get any problems with the F-gas side of things, where you're having to bring an F-gas business in to work with you alongside it to rectify it? It's
rare. So we're talking about, so when you need F-gas, either F-gas has leaked a little bit or something's starting to go wrong with the compressor. So we're looking after, I don't know, 400 different service contracts, installs, including some social housing, and we'll maybe get the F-gas guys out once a month or something. Okay. And it's generally just, this is mainly the split systems, maybe the pipe's been knocked or the gas isn't quite right, you know, just vac it down, check it, vac it back up, or tell them to say, the gas is okay, it's a compressor away. But you're talking, and if the compressor's starting to go on a heat pump, that's coming to the end of life.
I was just thinking about these 400 appliances that you're looking after. Hopefully they're not all done from the pub. When you're mobile phone,
Yeah,
be in there for quite
a Monday afternoon, Martin. Aye.
Okay,
Some on house parties.
Okay, are you working on any sort of government-funded delivery programs, Barry? You know, there's heaps out there at the moment. I know RHI, which is coming to an end. I know. Are these? So, are you involved with any of these delivery programs?
So this is what's actually driving the industry, really. So I can't see people putting heat pumps in without a decent incentive, because it's a lot of money to spend, unless they start changing the law, the rules a bit about it. But currently, interest-free loans from the Scottish Government plus some cash back, and then we've got RHI as well. And they, generally speaking, they cover the cost of the heat pump installation, but don't tend to cover any upgrade work. So you might find yourself, the client might find themselves putting out 4 or 5 grand to upgrade their heating system.
It's not too bad though. It's not, you know, if you've got that loan and it's only that amount of money, it's not a massive amount. You know, it is achievable for, I suppose, the common person, everyone. You know, because sometimes, you know, people would say, "Oh, well, I can't afford one," and you look at the cost comparisons for installation. But if the government are putting up some money there to support that, you know,
I think it's post RHI finishes in April this year. But if you read some of the papers the Scottish Government are releasing, they're saying they're going to continue to fund the interest-free loan and probably the grant for the next 2 to 3 years at least.
Oh, good.
And
good,
some of the work that SNIPEF's done as well with that heat strategy report, they were looking at trying to finalise it for a longer period of time, like RHI, give us a 5-7 year window so we can plan to that.
Yeah.
I would expect the Scottish Government to do something like that.
Yeah, I suppose thinking from a business perspective, it's having that pipeline of work identified. You know, that secures work for you into the future that allows you to invest and increase your output if we're going to meet these high demands that are coming down the road at us as well. So
yeah, because as an industry, we were expecting a drop off the same as PV done in biomass when the tariffs ended. But with the Scottish Government and the interest-free loans and the grants, I don't see it dropping too much.
Okay. Now that the RHI, like you say, is coming to an end there. There will be the clean heat grant that I believe is coming into play. Are these schemes are they difficult to navigate from your perspective, or is it more towards the client that has to deal with that?
The client's entering a financial agreement with those bodies, not us.
Okay.
So we don't deal with it. So we just point them in the direction. So in Scotland, the first protocol is, if they've not spoken to me first, then the first protocol is to go and speak to Home Energy Scotland. Yeah. And they'll start the ball on. They'll do telephone interviews, make sure the house is suitable, tell them about grants and funding, and start the process that way. They'll keep them right. And the loan payments is all a term with them directly, not with us. So the client just pays us in full, but draws a loan down later.
Right. So it's not much of a risk to you, I suppose. As well, you don't want too much money outlaid on jobs. That's the real risk to any business, is having money, you know, sat in jobs where you can't, you know, pay off.
Well, as well as MCS protecting the client, it protects us because we can have deposit schemes. Yeah. So that money can be put in a third-party bank as a deposit and drawn down later on if needed. Yeah. So
Okay. Now, here's one that I've heard. You need planning permission or permission from the local authority to install a heat pump on your property. Is that something that you've come across, or is it a bit of an urban myth?
It used to be a nightmare, Martin, because every council had different rules. It used to be terrible. Yeah. But permitted development rights allows us to put, depending on the size of the heat pump, because it's about the volume of it. But you can put a heat pump, an air source heat pump, on the rear or side elevations of the house without any permission. But you just got to be.
What I was going to say is, when they're considering that, what are they considering from a local authority perspective? Was it like the noise or the sight of it, or the, you know?
Permitted development rights also has to comply with MCS standards for noise. Right. Okay. But I mean, all the new generation units are nowhere near as noisy as it used to be. Yeah. It used to be hellish.
And I suppose,
but I mean,
developing the technology.
There's still some consideration. I wouldn't stick a heat pump under someone's bedroom window or point it at another bedroom window. I'd try and avoid that, because there is it can be a nuisance factor especially if you're rural, because there's no background noise.
Of course, yeah.
Just got to be conscious of it. Just be aware and make sure the client's aware. Like, if it sits here, it's going to be 10 metres from your neighbour. That's going to be fine. Oh, hang on, it's below your bedroom window. You might hear it in the summer if you're doing a hot water cycle. Are you going to be okay with that? Let's listen to it. Are you okay with it?
Yeah. Okay then. Ground source. Urban areas. Can we put ground source into urban area buildings? And you know, is it something that you're doing?
Yes. Okay. So traditional ground source. When most ground source, you think of a horizontal collector. Yeah. So you're looking for a field or a paddock or something like that. And that's good rural. Or if you're building a house and you're tearing the garden up anyway, that's great. Yeah. But the majority of our ground source are boreholes now, and to be fair, most of them are in city centres now. So currently, me and a few other installers like Xander for Green Heaters currently peppering Edinburgh with boreholes because Edinburgh's actually got a really good water table.
Okay.
The water moves really well in Edinburgh, so the thermal conductivity in Edinburgh is brilliant. But I'm kind of worried that maybe we're peppering Edinburgh too much, and that volcano's going to open back up again.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Get some geothermal heat.
Yeah.
So what's your approach to a borehole? So, you know, a client in an urban area asks you, well, look, I want ground source. I don't want air source. I want ground source. You know, what are you doing survey-wise to the ground to establish that you can get something down there? You know, what are the procedures there?
Drilling contractors are good for that. There's things you can check yourself, because you wouldn't believe the data that the UK government holds, because the British Geological Survey, maybe not the UK government right enough, but they've got every single borehole and the full geology of the UK on maps, so you can zoom in and check it.
Okay.
And there's also maps for water tables and stuff like that as well, that you can check that what you're drilling into, first of all, to make sure you've got decent thermal conductivity. But generally in Scotland, you're okay.
Yeah.
And also, you can go and you can look round about what boreholes have done in the last 150 years and see what they hit.
Ah, right. Okay. So
it's a good way of checking. Just say, all right, that guy, like for rural, there'll be a farmer within a mile radius that's been doing drilling for waters and stuff like that. And you can go and check it and say, all right, okay, he hit rock within 2 or 3 meters. Brilliant. That's good for us.
So you're talking about, you know, boring a hole there. When you're doing one, do you then report that and register it with the body?
Well, the drilling contractor does it. So
we're
heating engineers. We're not borehole contractors. So we'll get a specialist in. We go back. You tell a specialist what kind of depth we're looking for, because we're doing the depth calculations through MCS software or manufacturer software. So we go back to him and say, look, it looks like the rock is sandstone. I need 200 meters of borehole, and then he'll go ahead and drill it, and he reports it all. So it's nothing to do with you.
So again, you've got that flexibility and the type of system, you know, the technology that you're using. So it's very flexible for that building, isn't it, as well? And I would imagine the centre of Edinburgh, where you've been peppering holes all over, weakening the core's crust, there's a lot of old buildings. You know, it's not all new builds in the city centre, you know? Yeah,
they work great.
Aye, good. So I just want to touch a little bit on training. I know we're pushing on time-wise here. Dig into training and upskilling. Now, we know, you know, there's the general, you know, training and qualifications out there, you know, that are recognised by MTS. But is there any other training that you would recommend to anyone that's in this call today that should maybe do that would help them in delivering heat pumps successfully?
Design's critical.
Yeah.
You get a design wrong, the heat pump's not going to work right. Because you've just not got. If your radiator's too small, the heat pump will never heat the room, and it'll just run 24/7, and you end up with huge energy bills. It's a vicious circle. Yeah. So design is critical. MCS have their own spreadsheets for doing heat losses, but there's companies out there like Heat Engineer who do heat loss software, and they'll do training courses. So that'll help you understand heat loss and design better, because they'll also help you with pipe sizing. So that's the first protocol. As for MCS training, I'm not too sure who does that, who wouldn't do that. Yeah. But the bit that's going to make your business is going to be getting it right first time.
Yeah. Okay. Then.
Manufacturers as well. They've been pretty good recently as well. The manufacturers for designs.
I've noticed there's quite a few different training courses they offer as well. So I suppose if you're fitting a specific appliance or, you know, component, that if you did work with them, you know, you've got that specialist, you know, knowledge to be able to achieve that. So okay then. So regarding sort of training, are you putting your guys through regular training, or is it, you know, you do it once and that's it, sort of like an evergreen scenario, or is it regular things for them?
SNIPEF modern apprenticeships just now, which have got their own course. So they rather than getting to the end of the apprenticeship and specialising in gas or oil, we're now specialising in renewables. So as we speak, that's getting tailored more and more for heat pumps. So that's the current path we're doing, and they're getting trained on the tools with guys that have had 10 years plus of heat pumps. So that's the main protocol just now. Most training from us is from internally.
I think on-site, I mean, apprenticeships are based on on-site learning as well, aren't they? So I think it's essential to be doing the job, to be learning those skills, because it's all right doing it in a training centre, but it's not always a realistic situation. And you've got other things that come into play, like the client, for example, you know, those customer skills as well. I think that they're probably essential when you're going into people's homes.
Oh, there's Patrick put in the course, that Heat Geek as well. That's a good one.
Okay, yeah.
Shameless plug, he says, I was looking at those courses for the guys as well, because they're really good on understanding thermodynamics and stuff. So and
I suppose, you know,
manufacturing. The industry's changing quite quick, Martin. There's a lot more out there than there used to be. A lot more.
Yeah, and I suppose that's good for businesses that are looking to move across as well, is having access to this information, this training. It helps them be more confident in, delivering in the future as well. But I suppose it's keeping up to speed as well with manufacturers, because they evolve and develop and stuff like that. So there's obviously top up required on that, I would imagine, as well.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Well, I've sort of got through a lot of the common questions that I tend to get asked. There's probably a load more that people ask me. But like I say, it's all about trying to convince people and businesses, how, not convince, but, show them the way to come across, And from your perspective, Barry, is it a good move for a business to make?
It's not really a choice, to be fair.
Yeah.
If you're fitting gas boilers and you're going to be trading in 10 years' time, you need to start thinking about it.
Yeah.
The customers are going to be asking you before you're ready for it. So it's coming.
Future-proofing, isn't it? I suppose the key is to future-proof and start making those moves.
We're all capable. I mean, if you're gas safe, you're already doing a lot of the kind of stuff. You've already done some sort of, you already understand sizing, you already understand heat loss, you understand following procedures. It's just changing the skill set slightly.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, Barry. It's great to have an insight into your, your day-to-day activities, I suppose. That's what you're doing.
I love a rant.
And it'd be great to take some questions from the audience today. And, and if anybody wants to get in touch with me at a later date, feel free to sort of get in touch, and, I can sort of advise you further down the line as well if needed.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, guys. We've got some questions to rattle through. We are on a bit limited time, so we'll get through as many of these as possible. And then, like Martyn said, we can get anything that we don't get to, we can catch up with you afterwards. So Thomas was just on the point you were talking about. Manpower is one thing, but competent manpower is another thing. So Barry, do you have any advice on how to find your engineers and things like that?
I think all MCS contractors are struggling just now. There has been a general de-skilling of heating engineers. I come from a family of heating engineers, and if I look at what my dad and my uncles were doing in their 20s as a gas engineer or a heating engineer compared to what they're doing now, they were a lot more skilled. So, but I don't think I think we just need to find the right mindset of people and train them. I think that's what's going to happen. Too much HEP and too much combis. Need to start thinking a bit better.
And then, Martyn, from a SNIPEF point of view, what's the association doing to kind of help upskill people?
Like I said earlier, we're involved with like national occupational standards and the apprenticeship framework. So it's all about identifying, we work with Barry and some of his, some other members that attend our low carbon forum, and we find out what they need. So we'll take that and, try and shape the training delivery side of things. It's essential that anything that's created, industry get an opinion on that to what they want, because it's pointless creating courses and training that industry don't need, so if we can identify that. So we will work closely with our members, and we really value that feedback, because then it allows us to go to the likes of Skills Development Scotland and ask for something and say, look, this is what we would like to do moving forward, and we need to bring it up to date, keep it up to date. One thing I would say is industry moves quite quick, and regulation and education probably follows a little bit. So it's quite responsive and reactive to what happens. But yeah, we're a big advocate for apprenticeships, the tried and tested methods of getting people into the industry. But, at the moment, our workforce is probably shrinking. Every plumbing company that I talk to at the moment are struggling to get people. And that's not just in renewables, that's right across the industry. So it's probably a great opportunity for young people. There's going to be jobs and work there for them if they want to get involved. And maybe that's something we need to do, is look at the future of our industry 10, 15 years down the line, work at grassroots level into schools, trying to explain that this industry is, it's a positive place to end up on, it's a good destination for them to, to have their, career, I suppose.
Yeah, perfect. We got one from Edita. How much clearance do you need for an air to water heat pump? Can it be installed on the side of a house?
Yes,
Barry, do you have any experience with those ones?
Yeah. Generally 150, maybe 300, depending on the heat pump. But yeah, generally we'll if it's not a big heat pump, we'll just hang them off a bracket. You just got to remember, you've got to access it at some point. There might be some maintenance in the future, so maybe not hang it 2 stories up.
You guys were talking about the electrics earlier, but we got a question from Thomas. Do you come across many properties that require the electrical consumer unit to be upgraded?
What, like the fuse board? Well, we tend to put our own one in, actually, because you're doing a high current device, you can overload the RCD on it. See, I'm not a spark, but what we used to put, if you put like a 32 amp breaker in for a ground source with maybe a backup heater in it, and you've got loads of electrical stuff in it, there's a risk that you might overload it. So we just keep them all separate. So we just put a small consumer unit in. So most of them, small garage consumer unit with its own supply for the heat pumps. So everything's isolated.
Perfect. We've got a couple more. Anthony has done a BISA academy certificate. It's like an intro to heat pumps course because he wants to start installing heat pumps. How does this type of certificate help? It doesn't really fit, Barry, with your kind of experience getting into heat pumps, but maybe that's one for Martyn. What about these kind of intro courses?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for BISA, what they have offering wise. I think any knowledge is good knowledge, but you've got to think about what the likes of MCS would recognize as a qualification. They have a competency criteria that identifies the training and education or qualifications to get into that scheme. So if you're looking to be MCS accredited, which you don't have to be, of course, because it's all about funding and drawing down money, I would look at that competency criteria on the MCS website and identify your training course that's on that.
Yeah, good advice. And then we'll finish off with this one because it's quite a good one. What do you guys see as the future for heat pumps? We're talking about kind of RHI being phased out in 9 months. So what would you think the future for heat pumps should be? Barry, we'll go with you first, if that's okay.
So, like I said before, Scotland, I think, will continually fund it. It's slightly more aggressive than England's target. So I think they will try to continue with interest-free loans and continue with the grant system. So there'll always be money kicking about. But that was a carrot. There's a big stick coming as well because they don't talk about it as much. But we know about no new gas connections 2024. Pretty much all the self-builds now are using heat pumps now. The new builds won't be far behind. But then what they don't say, there's other things coming through the pipeline because they've got targets to bring the housing stock up to band C. And what they'll do is they'll start forcing you somewhere. Because there was just now, for example, you can't rent out a house that's band F or G, I think it is, in Scotland. There's a proposal to do that for selling a house as well. So
yeah,
they're going to, if the carrot's been there long enough for people to grab, if it's not going to take in, they'll just bring a big stick out. So I think they want to decarbonise the network. Something like 25% come from domestic heating and transport, and about the same. That's the two bits they're going to start chucking money at and put legislation on. So it's coming. Gas is coming to its end. So one way or another, we're putting something like this in. If it's not heat networks, it will be heat pumps.
Yeah.
Martyn, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty similar. They're coming. So I think we need to get ready as an industry, start future-proofing for that. I think if you're working in the heating industry now, within 10 years, you'll have been impacted at some point where, they are coming, like you say, Barry mentioned new builds, they'll come there. That's a bit of the stick, the legislation that will come, and force them in. So you will be seeing them. And Barry's installing them in all buildings as well. And I think it's a perfect opportunity for a business to look at new work streams for them, like you say, the gas is dissipating. I know we talk a bit about hydrogen, but that's quite far down the road. And if it is definitely coming, we're not fully sure of that yet. So heat pumps seem to be the topic at the moment, especially in Scotland. Scottish government are really behind sort of heat pumps. So it's going to impact you at some point quite soon, I would say.
No, perfect. Thanks a lot for joining us, everyone. Martyn's put his email address in there. If you do have any other questions, you can pop them in and we can get them back to you afterwards. This session, Kim asked as well, will be available to view on demand. As soon as we finish, it will turn into like a red YouTube click button and you'll be able to watch everything back on demand and share it with any friends or colleagues that may have missed out. But thank you, Barry. Thank you, Martyn. And thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.